On this week's episode of The Rise, we sit down with Jonathan Lehr, co-founder and general partner at Workbench. Founded in 2013 by Jonathan and co-founder Jessica Lin, Workbench is an early-stage, enterprise-focused venture fund based in New York City. With $375 million under management across 4 funds, including a recent $160 million Fund 4 announced in May of this year, Jonathan and team have written checks into companies like Socure, Cockroach Labs, and Spring Health, among others. Jonathan's fingerprints are all over the rise of New York City enterprise, and today he takes us inside that journey. I hope you enjoy. Jonathan, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
I figured I'd start out. You and Jess planted the enterprise flag in New York City over a decade ago. Just curious to get in your heads a little bit. What did you and Jess see in the New York enterprise scene that led to you forming and starting Workbench?
Yeah. So dating back to 2012, which actually even predates Workbench, both of us come from corporate IT world. So Jess at the time was working at Cisco Systems on a team that was really focused on agile software transformation. And the joke is at a place like that, it's kind of an oxymoron. And for me, I was at a very unique role at Morgan Stanley within IT called the Office of the CIO. And basically in that role, I had a front row seat to sit between 2 key groups. Number one was internal IT that had pain points up and down the tech stack. And on the other side was Silicon Valley VCs and startups that were trying to pitch us to become vendors of the firm.
Very cool.
And basically the time I was there was 2010 to 13. And I really had a front row seat to just so much change that was going on between first hitting a cloud, the rise of big data, constant, new security paradigms. What was really interesting is at that moment, it was at the tail end of the financial crisis when I joined, a lot of the big vendors, the EMCs, the Ciscos, the IBMs of the world weren't keeping up. So we as a firm actually turned to the startup ecosystem to bring new technology and solutions into the firm. But it's not as easy as, hey, meet a startup and now you have Morgan Stanley as a customer. We would have to really vet them to make sure that they actually solved a use case that mattered. And it was really in that role, working day in, day out, meeting hundreds of startups a year, you could kind of cut through the noise candidly, where sometimes you have a few kids out of a Google or Facebook building a new database that's very cool, but we didn't have that pain point internally. But when you actually did match, cutting edge tech with customer empathy and alignment to our use cases, a lot of magic happened. And having that front row seat for several years, I was like, holy crap. You don't graduate college being earlier in your career thinking, knowing full what enterprise tech is, let alone that banks are early adopters, that the New York City ecosystem is the most Fortune 500 companies that are those early adopters in the world. So I looked around and I was like, this is a really cool place to be in. And what happened is in January 2012, in my nights and weekends, I started the Enterprise Tech Meetup. Because New York historically had been known as an ad tech town. Then in the early 2010s, there were e-com companies, media companies. You had things like Guilt and Etsy and whatnot that took off.
Totally.
But really that next wave, we were primed for enterprise because the whole thought was, why not build a startup near your customers? So started the Enterprise Tech Meetup in my nights and weekends, and basically brought what Jess and I like to call the suits and the hoodies together to bring together the corporates and startups and
Awesome.
to do it on a monthly basis over the fun of pizza and beer, just like any other consumer tech meetup, but with a slightly more business focus where you see cool cutting edge tech demos, but you're not getting them. Like if you're at a Morgan Stanley or a Johnson & Johnson or a Bloomberg in IT, people are dialing you all day. They're sending cold emails to try to sell into you. If you could see a 5-10 minute snappy demo and say, hey, these one of the 4 demos that presented tonight is relevant to me, let me learn more. It's just more of an organic and really authentic way to meet. And a lot of goodness came from that, where people got customers, they got funded, they got hires. And doing that over the course of a year, I started getting a name as the enterprise tech guy in New York.
Love it.
And in mid-13, me and Jess had the opportunity to launch Workbench together.
And would you say you and Jess, I feel like a lot of times when folks start funds together, they bring some sort of complement, whether it's, you're more analytical and the other is a little bit more strategically focused. What would you say is the complement with you and Jess?
So we complement each other very well. I tend to be more of the quantitative guy, and Jess is the most creative. But what's super cool is we kind of align and get to the same place 99% of the time immediately. So we do have those brain waves where we work super well together.
Totally.
But we bring such unique skill sets that are complementary, where we can just go so fast and work really well together.
I love it. I love it. I actually worked when I was coming up in recruiting. I worked in New York for a couple of years, and at the time I was hiring software engineers, and I think like Node had just come. Everyone was talking about like server side JavaScript, and the best engineers were flocking to the New York Times, Refinery 29, Hearst Digital, a lot of like digital publishing were paying a ton. But I remember starting to see some enterprise, some B2B startups starting to come.
Yep.
But that was my New York was a very consumer bent, my experience. So I love that you're enterprise focused. In May, you raised $160 million fund four.
Yes.
I put this graphic out a couple of months back that captured funds that were started after, I think it was 2010, who have raised at least 4 funds. You guys did make the cut, and I think that the reason for the graphic saw PitchBook data, less than 20% of funds are successfully raising a fund 4. When you hear that stat, what does that mean to you, making it this far?
Oof. First and foremost, we're super grateful and really excited. I mean, when we were raising this last fund, the best compliment that Jess and I got from LPs was we meet a lot of GPs pitching us. You both are definitely the most excited and passionate about what you're doing, especially over a decade in. Sometimes people, it's a little long in the tooth for them. They lose some of the energy. Candidly, we were more jazzed than ever because for us, we built Workbench really from the ground up together. And the history was we started with a $10 million proof of concept fund in mid-13. Fund 2 was 49, fund 3, 125, and then we grew into this 160. Wow. We didn't just snap our fingers and get that fund. We can dig into a lot of the details, but that first institutional fund, which was the 49 after the proof of concept one, took 2.5 years to raise. We made every mistake in the book. Fund 3, which was raised during COVID, took a little over a year. Fund 4 took 2 months.
Wow.
So we learned a lot.
Incredible.
We proved a lot. Our discipline was appreciated. But really, when I say we're grateful and we're pumped, it's because we've got all this action going on in the AI world. The New York ecosystem is humming. And to have fresh capital to deploy here and a model that's been proven out over a decade, that's why we're just fired up and working honestly harder than ever.
I think a 2-month raise says a lot about what you have under the hood, under there. I meet with a lot of emerging managers, a lot of breakout managers also, and it's not an easy climate to raise right now. So I think that says a lot about you guys. I'm curious, over the last decade, New York, the ecosystem has changed quite a bit. Cursor is now in Soho, right? I think Thrive Cap is a big presence in Soho. You have folks that are headquartered in San Francisco opening offices in New York. Feels like the buzz is very real this time. Curious.
And you've got plenty of people that are just natively here and scaling the entire company here. So if I think back, when we were first launching Workbench, part of the shtick was, hey, we're raising our hands. There's an enterprise ecosystem here that's getting going, and you should pay attention to it, keep an eye out. And we used to do this State of New York funding, which thankfully we've actually stopped doing because we're just so mature. But I'll never forget, the first report was 2014. And the total funding for all enterprise startups in New York, $577 million. That number is like drilled into my head. What's funny is during peak ZERP in like 21, I think UiPath had raised a round that was bigger than that amount in one round, right?
Incredible.
But what was really cool from 2014 to really 2020 when we were capturing a lot of that data was you saw the rise of some of the early companies, the Datadogs, the Mongos. As they scaled, those IPOs were tremendously successful, right? I think 2019 really put New York on the map. But what's cool is behind the scenes, from growth stage at Series D deals to Series Bs and all the way down to seed, we actually over the past decade plus have had a really robust ecosystem. So it's not just AI, ML talent. It's not just dev tools and infra. It's not just security, different application layer tech. We've had all of it. And it started with, of course, local VCs that were here, and then a lot of people coming to town. But over the past decade, there's just been a lot of activity here where seed firms grew up. Some grew into Series A firms. Some, obviously, the big dogs opened their own outposts here. And, what's nice is we don't have to have the chat of, hey, is New York tech a thing? Which we did constantly over the first 5 years of our life.
Totally. I've been here once a month. I think this is the 4th month in a row I'm coming to New York, and they're either to kick off searches, investor searches, or they're to meet prospects, candidates, folks like you, right, in the community. You mentioned bringing institutional LPs into your fund too, and what a process that was. I'm curious, like a lot of emerging managers raising right now, a lot of folks are newer to the LP arena. How did you decide it was an appropriate time to go for that first institutional? Were you curious, strategic around looking at specialist fund of funds, endowments? Was there a certain angle you were leaning into?
So if I really go back to like T = 0 before even starting,
Please.
right? Our first LP, we had a unique situation in Fund 1 where we had a single LP that backed the whole $10 million Fund 1.
Wow.
And then Fund 2 is where we really got going, raising this institutional capital. And candidly, Jess and I didn't know what we didn't know. So as an example, we're raising the $40 million fund that we ended up hitting 49 for. We asked friends that had PitchBook logins, like, hey, can you export all the pension funds in it? We heard that they invest in venture funds, right? Like we knew we had this cool model where we're thesis driven. We had a cool model, early bet on New York. We're doing the go-to-market support. We checked every one of those boxes in the first fund. What we didn't know as former IT people is how to fundraise and who to fundraise from. So we get that list from PitchBook and we're going through it and we're spending time getting secondary connections, intros, only to learn that our fund size that we're raising in total is smaller than their minimum checks. So these days, I think over a decade later, like a lot of that, there's materials out there. Guys like Samir Kaji had tweeted so much. People like you now are helping that next generation with, honestly, that content, putting it out there. Some of the market maps that you've done, even of different LP types, that didn't exist when we got going.
Yep.
I think what was really important is to figure out who invests at different stages. So for these first institutional raises that we're talking about with different emerging managers, there's really two key groups at the end of the day. Number one is family offices. Depending on the cycle, they may be tapped out or looking for action. So during peak ZERP, all family offices were deploying. When we raised Fund 4, it was a very tough market for them, right? Because so many had deployed capital in funds and then co-invest and then direct deals, and people just needed to kind of sit out a little bit.
Totally.
And luckily for us, like we had graduated into like pensions and endowments at that point. But for people in this environment, it's really about sniffing out which family offices are the right partners and who can you even get to. And number two is those specialist fund of funds. And I think that's something that didn't exist before, where you have so many groups that are dedicated on the sub 100 million, and even many on the sub $50 million, really pre-seed emerging manager category. And some are using data science tooling, some are just using the networks or even have their own programs. And I think those are incredible resources for GPs to get out there. I think though, navigating that and getting those intros is really the hard part. And that's where you just have to go nonstop on tapping every person you know, every founder you've worked with, every GP you've ever partnered with to get those intros, because that's really the currency of how this goes, of getting in the room to meet these people and have the right conversations.
You feel like you need the introduction?
I think a warm intro, like with founder slams, we'll get cold emails and a lot of VCs will take it. If it's thoughtful, we'll take the meeting. I don't see that so much with LPs. And what's been surprising, but it's just the way it is that LPs really respect other GPs making the intros, because if you're doing it, it kind of puts your stamp of approval on the person and their firm. So over the years, we've made intros for friends had made intros for us. Where we really did well in the Fund 1 days was when we were the tiny person on the cap table, just proving our model. We had done deals with the likes of Excel and Lightspeed and Index, and had frankly worked our asses off to help in very unique ways, especially on go-to-market for some of the companies. Like if I think back to Fund 1, the work we did with our companies, Socure, Cockroach Labs, or Dialpad, candidly just earned respect from some of these people that we punched above our weight class for such a small fund. And we kind of came back to them for, number one was advice. And then number two was ultimately some intros in those early days. And when you got intros from those kind of tier one people, that really helped differentiate us in the early days. Like, okay, this is a group in New York. They're early. They're doing something cool. There's some early proof points. Like, you want to make a bet on this team.
The power of an introduction is pretty wild to me. Like I get a fair amount of inbound. Don't think there's a lot of search firms that are hiring partners with any regular cadence out there, and I'm very grateful to be one of them. So I get a fair amount of inbound, and it's hard to keep up with them. But if I do get introduced by someone that I respect and I really like and I admire, regardless who that person is, like I'm finding the time, kind of thing. So I totally understand that. I need to find a friend with a PitchBook login. That's my one takeaway there. But no, I do want to talk about some of the portfolio.
Yep.
A little bit. So Spring Health, Socure, Cockroach Labs. I tremendous fans of the three of them. Honestly, that's I pulled those three out of the portfolio. I'm curious. Couple of things on those ones. One, can we just start on Spring Health? Tell me about, like, how did you hear about them? How did you find them? What got you to look at them as, like, I want to be part of this story?
Yep. So Jess gets all the credit on this one. We divide and conquer as a team across different swim lanes. So this fell within the application layer future of work stack that she had covered.
Awesome.
And as part of what we try to do that's differentiated than other seed funds is, number one, we're way more concentrated. We were historically do 20 deals in a fund. We'll do 24 now compared to 50, 100 or whatnot. We're also very hands-on and take board seats and whatnot. And as really before we make an investment, we do a lot of prepared mind work. We're developing these themes. So Jess had spent a lot of time looking at the Fortune 500 space, specifically to figure out what's the future of employee benefits. And she had looked at a lot of startups that were taking on different categories for financial wellness, so to speak, in terms of just like teaching and educational services, in terms of maybe 401k support. But a lot of these kind of seemed either like features or things that Workday could offer themselves or what legacy APs already did. But she started seeing this emerging problem space really around just mental health crisis in the country at the time. And this predated even COVID, which, ultimately it ended up helping Spring's business a lot. But basically, Jess had been doing a lot of research in this space and randomly was at a conference in New York City and she met April. And it was one of those things where it was very fortunate and lucky that them two met. But Jess was immediately able to speak the same language and appreciate what April was building. And I remember she grabbed me. She's like, John, you got to meet this founder. She's amazing. Her and her co-founder, Adam, who had done a lot of published research around some of just the efficacy of the approach that they were taking at Spring that was different than other players in the market.
Interesting.
Because what's interesting is they weren't first to market. They might have been third, but thankfully they've just utterly dominated in so many ways and as they've scaled. But Jess basically connected us all with April. And I mean, the pitch was incredible. She was articulate since day one. And her and Adam have just built an incredible company. So it was really having that prepared mind to understand, what is the ecosystem like? Here's how they're different. Here's really where they are relative to their peers, but where they can get to, especially given the enterprise focus that they wanted to go after. In the early days, they had some early mid-market traction, but April and Adam thought big and they wanted to go after those big, hairy enterprise deals. And, I mentioned I'm from Morgan Stanley. Historically, a bank would kind of never look at that. You mentioned HR tech outside of Workday. They're like, get out the room. Some of Spring's biggest multi-million, like tens of $1 million customers are Wall Street banks today.
Wow.
In addition to many else of the Fortune 500. So credit to Jess for saw where the puck is going. And obviously the founders here at Spring for just continuing every year to just beat plan, build an amazing company. And it's a cool New York win.
I love the New York wins. And Spring Health, last valuation, $3.3 billion. So pretty cool.
Yes.
I mentioned Socure, $4.5 billion. We don't have to go in as much detail necessarily on Socure, but Socure and Cockroach Labs, different space.
Yep.
Curious if that was more on your end of the
equation. So Socure is right in my wheelhouse. And
your wheelhouse is what exactly?
So I cover a lot of AI and machine learning, both at the infrastructure layer and then some application layer for us. And then me and my colleague Kelly split the developer tools and cloud native stack.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And when you say some of the app stuff, is this like Andreessen collapsed? They have the infra group, and then they have apps for developers and technical adjacent. Is that kind of how?
Similar, yeah. So something like fire hydrant and incident management, alerting.
Totally.
I'm on the board of Auth and permissions as a service based off Google's Ansible. I'm on the board of. But then Kelly has a company that's in detection engineering space called Prequel or Earthly, another dev tool company. So those we split that category together.
Awesome. Very exciting.
But what's really cool about Socure that's worth calling out is since day one, we've had two core engines in our model. Number one is corporate engagement. And this is where our unique insight when we first launched Workbench was most people ignore, frankly, just like crap all over IT. But for us, coming from that world, we saw the amount of just unique insights that was untapped there. Because if we just take a step back and we think about enterprise versus consumer investing,
Mm-hmm.
I know some people have very interesting strategies in consumer, but a lot of it back in the day was like it felt like buying a lottery ticket.
Yep.
But for us in enterprise, if you think about it, there's pain points, there's priorities, and there's budget dollars. So what if we could map where Fortune 500s are going 12, 18 months out by having conversations cross industry, across FinServ, pharma, media, and then from there, try to figure out, all right, here's a theme that we can actually generate. And basically, we'll publish that on our blog. And then the other key engine is the community. So we'll host events ranging from the enterprise tech meetup that would get 200 people to 10-person dinners and everything in between.
Wow.
So we put out the thesis, we kind of put out the bad signal with these events to find the best founders, and we play matchmaker. And this is exactly what happened with Socure. We had spent extensive time with financial services leaders thinking about identity, specifically for things like new account opening. So if you're a Bank of America, someone's applying for a mortgage, Capital One, someone wants a credit card, how do you know when they make the account, are they who they say they are? There's a lot of fraud in that process. And back in the day, there was a lot of credit invisible people. Socure had a unique insight to say, hey, we have a new model that's actually ingests a lot of existing data that's used, but then it pens online social data that had never been used before. So they're bringing new data source in, and they're actually using it in a novel way. And what's cool for us is it's not that you always meet that founder you fall in love. I'll never forget, we got connected through my friend Jake to Johnny, the co-founder, and he presented at the meetup. And it wasn't for months later that we ended up investing in him, because first we're like, what is this? Who are these guys? Like, both Johnny and Sunil, the co-founders, came from very atypical backgrounds.
Awesome.
But we actually did the work to get to know them, and we're like, oh God, these guys are workhorses. In our early days, we used to have a workspace where companies would work. I would see Johnny at 9 a.m. interviewing a candidate, 1 p.m. meeting a customer, and then 9 p.m. while we're grinding, he's there like helping with API specs with one of his engineers, something like that. And when you see stuff like that, you know that you've got a special founder. So not only did we invest there in their seed round, but we ended up making an introduction to Bank of America, which ended up becoming their first marquee customer, $1 million plus deal, has since grown. A year after that, we ended up hosting a conference with Bank of America at our old office where we highlighted them to show even more legitimacy to other financial institutions that were around and other investors. That ended up helping them raise future rounds and gain that credibility. And then it's just been a continued tear since there.
I love how you light up when you talk about being able to not just make the introduction, but the conversion. I think that's really cool. I think that says a lot about you, to be completely honest with you. Is this a formalized buyer network for Workbench, would you say?
So formal in the sense that we spend a lot of time on it, but this isn't some pay-to-play thing. It's not like we have hundreds of corporate LPs. What we found, and it's so shocking, we don't keep it a secret, but no one else does this, is that in enterprise tech, Fortune 500s have these big budgets, and within that, the early adopters tend to be FinServ, pharma, media. Those are the three industries. So if we're talking retail, very tough go-to-market. You're talking manufacturing, industrials, they often don't have the talent, right? Or sometimes there's just too much margin pressure on their business to like invest ahead for new tech. But those three industries, you spend time, they're going to tell you where the puck's going. And not everyone, there's a lot of nuance, which is, again, we come from this world. Morgan Stanley may be buying early security software, but holding back on cloud. JP's early on cloud, but not going in ML. Johnson & Johnson buys ML, but doesn't. So it's like really knowing, it's not a CIO, it's who are people 1, 2 rung down that are decision makers.
Interesting.
And part of our community is actually hosting quarterly roundtables with these executives to get domain experts together. It's hosting the meetups and letting them come learn about new tech. So
interesting. And these are like VP. These aren't the C. This is not just the CIO of Johnson & Johnson.
Correct. Some instances we know them, but it's really to get to those key VPs who own something within historically the data science world, now AI infra. And then are you looking at things like reinforcement learning? Like knowing the people to ask those questions helps us inform our themes. And then when we're evaluating startups, as part of diligence, we make these customer introductions. Because
part of your diligence?
As part of diligence. It's not that we expect them to close, but everyone can talk about the tech. And where we're most differentiated than most Silicon Valley funds is they may argue your product roadmap and debate it to all ends and try to flex their tech knowledge. For us, I want to invest in the expert in X space, right?
Sure.
Whatever you're building in. But what I want to do is suss out, and oftentimes we're backing technical founders, what is your go-to-market prowess? I know you're not a former VP sales. You might have been an engineer, an SRE leader or something, but founder-led sales is going to be the early days. How do you pitch a customer? How do you tell the story? Are you rambling on forever? Can you get through a slide past your background, right? Do you listen? And then are you actually malleable enough to take feedback and learn? So we do a ton of go-to-market work between intros, work with our sales advisor, Kieran, who does a lot of go-to-market support hands-on with companies, both pre and post-investment, and then using those insights to inform, all right, where do we want to invest?
Interesting. So 2 quick follow-ups there.
Yeah.
If I'm a founder, I'm a technical founder, I have a little bit of traction, I'm pre-seeded already, I'm ready to raise a seed round, have a handful of mid-market customers, I'm trying to punch up into the enterprise. If I'm meeting with Workbench, whether it's you or someone else on the team,
Yep.
is there a chance that a customer introduction, a prospect introduction comes from that diligence if you like the first, if you like
100%. So we don't do it every first meeting.
Right.
But as we're digging in, maybe it's a second, third meeting, we're like, okay, this has legs. This aligns to a potentially open thesis that we have.
Interesting.
Then we've got a network of people ready to go.
Amazing.
And as we dig in, that is, we're sometimes going to see 2 or 3 companies that look similar.
Totally.
That commercial mindset and that customer empathy is what's going to differentiate compared to all the other factors, team, product market that all funds will look at, which we do too. It's that commercial mindset is really, that's the big differentiator for us.
Speaking about commercial, community as a moat.
Yes.
Your Meetup group now has over 10,000 members since inception.
Even more than that now, probably.
That's incredible. It's inception in 2012. I'm curious, why invest so heavily in the community building piece when a lot of firms really aren't right now?
So for us, it's really that a rising tide raises all boats. Historically, we made that early bet on New York, and it was like, hey, we got to help grow this thing so that we can actually get more customers engaged. We can get more startups building here. The reason why we do it today is because we continue to operate quite differently than other firms. We're never doing an event for an event's sake. All of us have lives and families. We work hard, but we're not here to just throw parties, right? The key is that everything ties to either helping develop further out a new investment theme. It could be helping build pipeline for a portfolio company. It could be getting talent together that could potentially help us with diligence or joining new companies. So there's a selfish reason that it builds our network in a very authentic way that you're not going to get if you're living on Zoom, that you're not going to get if you're not out there bringing people together. So really, it helps us just continue growing in a very high leverage way to find the right executive talent for our startups, to find them the customers, and really also those diligence node. Because some categories, as much as we lean on the Fortune 500 for customers, those aren't always the first customers for companies. If I take Socure or Arthur AI, Arthur closed a big insurance company as their first customer. We connected a large bank who became their second. Awesome. Right? But then you look at Fire Hydrant, it was in the incident management space. They started selling to other startups, then going mid-market tech, and then growing into Fortune 500 in the bank world. So for us, it's not that you have to go pitch a bank or something like that.
Sure. What
we want to know is, how big is your market? How wide is this opportunity? If you're only selling to other startups and the market is capped there, we're probably not the right investor for you.
Totally.
But if you want to nail your go-to-market and figure out how to get that ICP defined, how to message to them, how to build pipe, go that 0 to 1, and then from there figure out what is my go-to-market path. That's really where we like to lean in.
I think a seed investor being able to make introductions that could lead to 7 or 8 figure ACVs is a pretty good definition of value add. That's what I'd say there. You mentioned the sales advisor quickly. That's actually a new one. I don't think I've heard of just a sales advisor at seed. What exactly is their day-to-day looking like, and how are they supporting the portfolio?
Yeah, so he's actually someone that we know from the Workbench community. Here you go, right?
Amazing.
From back in the day, he had worked at a company in the compliance space that sold into large financial institutions. Then he worked at data management companies. So he's always been around our ecosystem, even though he wasn't working at Portcos.
Yep.
And then when he finished his last CRO job, he's like, hey, I want to keep working with companies, but probably in a more fractional way. And we realized there was this great fit because most people with Kieran's experience are, candidly just kind of hanging out and maybe being like, hey, I'll get on the phone once in a while. What Kieran does is absolutely phenomenal and unique. He has helped create playbooks that you can download on our website He hosts regular webinars where he'll do mock pitches as if you're selling to a customer, and he'll break down, hey, you showed the demo too quickly. Hey, you didn't listen to this point that they were bringing up around a pain. Hey, you didn't do this. Hey, you didn't ask for the next meeting. So he does these tactical things you can just watch.
Yep.
Right? He helped us create guides for everything from like boring stuff like scoping a design partner contract. Boring, but absolutely critical if you're an early company, right? Things that many other firms would just overlook. He helped with pricing calculators, like all the nitty gritty actual shit that you have to do as a founder. Between us, Kieran, and then the broader network, we're setting you up for success really through this Workbench offering.
I love that. I love that. I've always worked more on the product, tech, investor side. I did work for an absolute legend and icon, this woman, Mercedes, at my last firm, Artico, who's an absolute like savant when it comes to anything business, go-to-market. She also does great work on the investor side too. But what she drilled into me on the go-to-market front is CROs selling compliance software to the enterprise, probably a little bit, that's a grind. That's an absolute grind versus, let's go sling, ChatGPT into the enterprise, right? It's probably a little bit less resistance, at least I would imagine, on that sell. So I love his background. I think that's tremendously valuable. That's incredible. So quickly on, I just your playbook for enterprise at seed. So you're writing between $3 and $6 million checks at seed. You like to lead.
So one clarification. Rounds. So we're writing checks between 2 to 4.5 out of the fund. The rounds themselves tend to be anywhere from about 3 to 6.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. I am curious on the go-to-market side. What's the hardest go-to-market lesson you've seen founders learn along the way?
So it used to be very easy to say a lot of Silicon Valley founders, because we'll invest a lot in New York, but also around the country. A lot of Silicon Valley founders would think if you build it, they will come. And I think over the past decade, people have learned that it's not that quite simple. But the problem is with the rise of PLG, product-led growth, during COVID and ZERP days, a lot of people thought that their business could be very similar to all the other bottoms-up businesses that grew. And while for many businesses that's a great go-to-market motion, for most it's actually not. For most, there's a deployment. You're going to actually want to be hands-on with the customer. You're going to want to help integrate internally and make, adjust some workflow and actually understand what the real pain is, and then be able to actually become more embedded and critical to those organizations. So I think people went too far into the PLG, and that actually snapped back in like 2023 when the market reset a bit. These days, though, I think everyone wants to be Cursor now. And what's really interesting is yesterday, you see all these tweets about Devin. I think there is something like, I forget what ARR they hit off just 20 million of burn.
Yep.
But a lot of posts are talking about actually how they've really prioritized the enterprise. And this is almost counter to all the vibe coding companies that are scaling 0 to 100 faster than ever. But we don't know. Are their margins? A lot are negative gross margins. Some are, I think, low single digit. Yeah. And I think the bet for those companies is obviously they're onto something very cool and it's a unique position to be in. And I'm sure a lot will figure it out. But when you think about going after the enterprise early, it's harder. Again, you're going to have to figure out the deployments, and a lot of them maybe have started early days like, hey, we're not going to do VPC, we're not going to go on-prem, and over time they figure it out. But one of the tweets I thought might have been from Swix, this famous developer guy. I think he said one account started $1.5 million and they 10x'd it in a year with a large bank. So it's like the size of the pot of gold that you can go after in Fortune 500 is so huge that you just need to understand how can I be differentiated and how can I crack this nut? And obviously, can you actually sell to them? But there's just so much opportunity there that I think it's overlooked by especially the Valley startups. Here in New York, people have more empathy there and they target it more.
Interesting. If let's say I'm a founder, you just led my seed round, I'm fresh into the Workbench portfolio.
Yeah.
What can I expect support-wise from the Workbench team month 1 and month 12?
So the 3 big things that we do, and then I'll sequence them, is number 1, go to market, which I mentioned, and I'll get back to that. Number 2 is honestly recruiting. I mentioned all these dinners, meetups, etc.
Totally.
We'll get lists of engineers. Everyone needs engineers in the early days. We host developer happy hours. We host dinners and topics around specific languages that we can find very specific talent and send to our companies, right? So helping them with those early engineers, early sales and marketing leaders, like, it's not a one-on-one thing. We don't have a talent partner. Each of us does that through our events, through our network. And then fundraising is the third piece, where we're helping companies really plan long-term around that Series A and beyond. What milestones are we going to need? What's the narrative, and who should I be talking to, and working backwards from there. But the key within go-to-market, I always like to break down the 0 to 1 on a more kind of granular level. So if I break down the 0 to 0.5, that's usually around defining your ICP, the ideal customer profile. And as I mentioned before, some companies may start bottoms up or may start SMB. Some may start big enterprise and really going direct top down. Some are somewhere middle out or mid-market, right? It depends on both the customer type and also where you're breaking in level-wise. We do extensive work between, again, a lot of times just one-on-one intros or through some of the dinners and events we'll do for more broad conversations to figure out who should I be talking to. And what keeps me fired up 13 years into this journey is really every company is different. As much as we have playbooks, as much as we say, here's a best practice, a startup selling software X for pain point Y is going to have different incumbents. It's going to have different other whippersnappers, startup competitors. It's going to have different existing workflows within the use case that they're targeting at enterprise or other startups that they're selling into. So it's always different, but you need to figure out where can you actually catch that fire and bottle it and then repeat it. So it's defining that ICP as the 0 to 0.5. And then the 0.5 to 1 involves everything from how do I nail my messaging to this ICP? How do I do demand gen around it? How do I get intros to close early customers, which we help with? How do I develop pipeline? So we have playbooks around even hosting dinners, how to host events and things like that. And then once our companies do them, we'll often co-host so that it's Workbench and Company X, and it's less salesy to the practitioner that they're targeting. So Fire Hydrant did one recently for SRE leaders. AltZ did one for leaders and permissions and things like that. And we'll bring prospects to the room for them as well.
You mentioned that you're helping navigate the Series A raise. I'm very curious. Is there an investor or a firm, we don't have to say the actual investor, or we don't even have to say the firm. Ideally, you can say the firm. Let's say you have this incredible founder, you feel like maybe the next Socure, right? Maybe the next Cockroach Labs, they're just starting to want to talk and meet folks for their Series A. They hit all the check marks on metrics that we want to track, and they're ready to go. One, do you guys do anything Series A and beyond through an opportunity fund? And two would be, what's your thought process for matching a DevTools founder?
For sure. So our initial check will always be at seed, and then we have a big chunk of the firm, almost 50% reserved for follow-on into the A and B.
Incredible.
So that's coming out of the fund.
Would you lead one of the follow-ons?
No, so we're only leading the seed round, taking the board seat, very hands-on there, and then only doing our pro rata in the A and B. So we're never entering or leading the A or B. In terms of Series A's, this is where, again, the same I kind of talked about nuanced approaches around the go-to-market and the customer type. Every firm is different and every partner is different. So there may be good firms that don't have the right DevTool partner. There may be a DevTool partner who's phenomenal that's at a lesser known firm. And candidly, what we try to guide our founders to is the right partner that's going to help you scale your business in a way that you need. Some people really do need additional go-to-market help in a way, like we don't know everything. And, there's way more experienced board members than us. So maybe you want to complement further as you're scaling a sales org to go 5 to 50, right? I'm not going to pretend to be the expert in that. So finding someone that has that experience, maybe it's more marketing and brand. Maybe it's that their firm has hype to it that we're going to want to make sure that we attach to so we get some tailwinds behind us and things like that. So there's actually a lot of calculations that go on. And we actually just wrapped up, we had led a pre-seed and then we co-led a seed. So we wrapped up one of those and went through that exercise with a short list of seed firms. We're doing it right now, even for a Series B for one of our companies, because what's really interesting from a vantage point of seed is we are concentrated, right? So each of us GPs, the three of us, are only doing a couple deals a year, 2 to 3 a year. So we're working very closely with these companies. And even though they'll have a Series A firm, not that you're hawking your own wares, but when you make the intro to Series B, it doesn't carry the same weight that it's like, oh shit, a seed investor is still hands-on 4 years in.
It's really neat.
And they're helping them. There must be something really special here.
Totally.
And when we can talk intelligently and we show that we've actually done the work and why we're excited, and now we have 12 years of brand and track record under our belt, it makes a difference and it really helps there.
Started Nucleus on the belief that the venture landscape is going to look incredibly different in the next 3 to 5 years, and it's going to be shaped by breakout funds like yourselves, like Thrive and Green Oaks folks started in the last, call it 15 years as my, hypothetical guardrail, and have been part of this new wave of venture through the emerging funds of the world. I think a lot of the legacy platforms are maybe not might not be in everyone's hypothetical top 10 list in a couple of years, and I want to play a small short in helping shape that.
Yeah.
I'm curious, you just successfully raised the fund 4. It said, under 20% of managers are getting there. What advice would you give a first-time manager raising a fund 1 today?
So as much as there's more resources today, there's more competition than ever today. And it's really having that hard look in the mirror and figuring out, why am I doing this? And what is my differentiation? And it sounds so simple and so cliche, but I can't tell you how many people I meet that want to start a fund, whether they were a former founder or break out from a bigger platform fund. And I'm like, what's your differentiation? What's your edge? You can't just say, I worked at Palantir and I'm going to get all the Palantir. Or maybe these days I worked at Ramp and I have that network. Sure, that could work for a couple of years, but what's your, if you're building a firm, Jess and I signed up for a multi-decade working relationship together to, work with these founders, to return money to LPs. And both of us could not be doing anything different today. And hopefully my passion comes through 12 years in that's honestly the truth. For us, if someone says, how are you different? It's the New York angle, it's the go-to-market edge that no one else does. And, I have the data to support that. What else is someone going to do today that's different? And there's so many niche opportunities that can be sought after. And then it's just a question of, how do you message that? And then how do you prove that your background and your experience is right for it?
I'm curious. I'm raising a fund 1 right now. I've made a big list of high net worth individuals, of multi-stage GPs, of family offices. What advice would you have to me, the fund 1 manager about to send my first email asking for a meeting, as I think about my first LP construct?
I would say, awesome that you got the list. Now do the painstaking part 2 of the work, which is add a column and figure out every second degree connection you have. And you are going to have to be shameless. It feels like shit to have to do that and ask all these people for favors, some of whom you're friends with, so it's easy, some of whom you haven't talked to in a long time. But the only way that you're going to do it is if you can get past that ego and say, I'm going to build a pipeline. And to my earlier comment, LPs don't want cold emails. You have to come in through a warm person. Ideally, it's another LP or a GP that they are invested in. But if not, it could just be someone that they know. So at least it's that first trusted, vetted intro. And you better make that blurb punchy around, here's who I am, here's what the firm does, here's some proof points around, and here's my differentiation and my edge.
I'm sure there's many that you can name, but who's maybe 1 or 2 LPs that have been a real part of the Workbench story that you really just genuinely appreciate, or part of the LPAC?
So we're very fortunate to have an amazing group of LPs that have really been supportive, because again, the New York story for enterprise tech, the go-to-market focus, wasn't always obvious until kind of the data was there. So a lot of people bet early on us. But to call out 2 people in particular, number 1 is Hunter from Stepstone, previously Greenspring. They've been a very early and very active supporter. I mean, he is probably the most networked LP out there. Between the guidance he's given us over the years and just in a very matter-of-fact way to just help us on strategic questions, but then also filling our funnel with LP introductions. And again, having that good word from him, that vetting from him as an LP that's existing, and then making those intros, he has just had an incredible impact. And their annual meeting draws an incredible mix of LPs and also other GPs that are really high quality. So I make sure to go to that every February. So he gets one shout out as Mr. Connector. And then also Margot Doyle from S Cubed is an amazing LP of ours. Family office, very institutional in size and caliber. And every tough question, every strategic thought, she's been there for, at this point, close to a decade, supporting us. And
incredible.
Again, where Jess and I think have done really well is we brought a non-venture perspective to venture because we came from IT world. But at the end of the day, when you're growing a firm and you want to build a franchise and you're thinking through portfolio construction and follow-ons, having her advice along the way and just like sage counsel, ultimately, we could always turn to her for real advice.
She sounds amazing. Rapid fire here.
Yep.
You started at a time where a couple of other New York firms got going right around that same, like that 2010 to 2015 era is minted.
Yeah.
Like that's an excellent vintage. I'm curious, and it doesn't have to be from a firm that started it there, but what other GPs in New York do you feel like have made a real impact to the community over the years?
Yeah, so an easy one to call out is my buddy Rick Zullo at Equal Ventures. So here we are talking about the challenges of some of our early fundraisers, about how do you act as a fund one manager now. And he also has been in the game for a while, so he's not a newcomer. But what's amazing is he started really the emerging manager community in New York City. And this dates back, I don't know, 8 years ago. We used to just hang out over beers or whiskeys and kind of lament like, oh shit, how do we do this? Who do we talk to? Oh, this person said that they're deploying, they're not. And just like being able to lament to each other how hard it was and just have someone who got it. And what's cool is the group that he had, no one was competitive with one another. We were all doing different focus areas, so we could just be real and swap nodes.
Yep.
What started as like 5, maybe 7 people that would meet once in a while became this formal group that has hundreds of people in a Slack. And he does webinars where LPs will reverse pitch and talk about what they're focused on. So think about this value for a fund one person raising. You're figuring out who. Sometimes the who, you can't Google this stuff. So even finding out who is an LP is hard. Then hearing from them what their focus area is so you can actually tailor a message appropriately. Like he's giving people a huge leg up there. And then he does an annual summit for the last several years that gets incredible caliber of people. So he deserves a big shout out.
Go, Rick. I love it. Last one. What emerging managers out there are you most excited about, or at least following, tracking really closely? High ceiling emerging managers. I'm going to ask them in full transparency to come on the podcast as a guest. So who are you following at the emerging manager?
Yeah. I've got a couple for you off the bat. One is our good friend, Amanda Robson. She left Cowboy. She started Modern Technical Fund. Recently, a few months ago, announced her fund one. We already share a deal together, and we used to swap notes back when she was at Cowboy. We share not just the same focus. Cool, we both do enterprise. We have a love for infra, but a lot of the ethos around community, around helping with go-to-market. She shares a lot of that on the West Coast and does it with her own unique spin on it. So we're in very close touch and a lot of respect for what she's building. A lot of excitement now that she has the close under her belt and she's fully in business.
100%. I love Robbie. I think she's an absolute star, and I'm glad to say that she's agreed to come on the pod. So I'm putting this into the ether. Robbie, I'll see you in a couple months.
But I'm going to give you one more since she's already on the pod.
Please.
Another pre-seed manager that we work with is actually a very seasoned enterprise founder vet. His name is Andrew Peterson, and he has a pre-seed fund focused on a lot of security startups. Called Aviso Ventures.
Interesting.
He had started a company, Signal Sciences. I wish we had been investors there because it's very rare to find the technical prowess with that customer empathy, that 1-2 punch I talked about earlier. He had that in spades, had an incredible outcome where he scaled and sold the company to Fastly. And he's been an amazing partner. We've already done multiple deals together. We just did a dinner together at Black Hat.
Amazing.
So he has a great pre-seed fund focused on cybersecurity. Then you should definitely have him on too.
I would love to. I'm in LA. It's where I came up, and that's one of the best outcomes in LA tech. So that sounds perfect. And John, thank you so much for the time, and I hope you have a great annual meeting.
Thanks. Really appreciate what you're doing here for the ecosystem as well.
Thank you, sir.